Hello everybody, my name is Eric. Today we're going to be taking a look at these Visual Studio Code malicious themes. Now, themes are a category that most people would not even see as a cyber threat. We had a false alarm a while back with the guy who made that material design theme and then got into a beef with Theo, but that all turned out to be suspicious but innocent. And there have been plenty of extensions. But what I didn't even think about is, of course, a VS Code theme is just an extension. Now, there is sandboxing and a permission system, but unfortunately, people just have fatigue to those kind of things, so we don't even look at it. So we're going to look at how you install this, and then what happens, how much of a risk is it. So let's check these out. Now, these themes are simply stolen. They're called remastered, but nothing has been remastered. And the scary thing is all of these have been there for a long time. 9 months. These have gone unnoticed. Now, someone in my Discord downloaded these, and honestly, I will have to ask them how they found it, because they don't seem to be that prominent. This is the most popular, the Amber theme remastered. Ultimately, the malware is the same. So we can see themes, and it shows that, and we can see details, and we can click install. I think there's somewhere where the permissions prompts, but I don't even remember. Okay, so now we can choose the new theme, enable it. Okay, there we go. Now we can ProcExp is the one we want, and we'll just try running that again so we can see a bit of what happens. Now, it would seem that this has incredibly... Oh, here we go. So it dropped the file. So this is insane. They found a obscure UAC bypass. Before we proceed further with the analysis, I am just going to take a quick break for today's sponsor. I think this is really an interesting case of something I would have never thought would have been a cyber threat. Malware hides in places you expect and those you don't. Today we're looking at a really sneaky payload, and as these threats grow, your business should stay prepared. That is why this video is sponsored by ThreatLocker. Instead of chasing every possible threat, ThreatLocker flips the model. You choose what's allowed, and it blocks everything else without explicit approval. How it works: 3 steps. First of all, install ThreatLocker. It starts in learning mode, observing the software you need. Step 2, let it learn. It maps the apps, scripts, and services your team actually uses. Step 3, lock it down. Switch to protected mode, and anything unrecognized is denied by default. ThreatLocker maintains a live list of approved applications, so the updates you trust keep working, and its patch management tells you when unpatched software is putting your business at risk, and it doesn't stop at allow or deny. With application-level ring fencing, you can lock applications to specific folders, remove internet access from tools that don't need it, and control exactly how approved software is allowed to behave. Ready to move from reactive to proactive security? Strengthen your organization's security posture today at threatlocker.com/Eric Polker. Now back to the video. So here's what happened. So we get this net.inf file, signature Chicago. I think that's referring to like Windows 95 in this context. And then we got custom destination, pre-setup commands, sc create, shd policy service. So what this does, and I believe you would need to be an administrator, but this bypasses you note how I never got a UAC prompt, and this is going to run as system. Well, this whole thing is exploiting the CMSDP, which is Connection Manager. And there is some documentation about this exploit. Now, this is, to my understanding, used to set up a VPN or a proxy type of thing. But with the right INF file, this can be used to bypass basically everything and gain system privileges. It's also got some value as an anti-analysis, because if you upload a file that's intended to run as a service onto a sandbox without modification, it doesn't do anything useful. So now we'll go up to service host, where we might find, I'm not sure if it is running right now. It's got a fairly innocuous looking name now, so it looks like it didn't actually install. But we can try running this ourselves, and there it early terminates so that the CMSDP doesn't throw an error. So we can try and see if we can get this going. Let's just check that the shader is where it puts it. And here we go. So the actual malware lives in shared.exe. And that's interesting. That's actually bigger than the one I dumped before. Now cache.config doesn't seem... That seems to be an empty file. We're just going to copy these to downloads for safekeeping. Because the banner.png I saw, so there is another trick to extracting it. So this is now going to run as a service with system level privileges. At least it would have. But lucky for us, we can figure out what this really would have done by simply running this. So we've now got, I hate PowerShell so much. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. I have one friend who likes it though, so maybe, I'm sure there is, like, if you get into it, I'm sure there's logic to it, but it doesn't. So now let's see. I'm still not seeing share.exe. Let's go back over to our systems. Interesting. So that doesn't seem to run for very long. We could just try, we can always try throwing procmon at it just to see if there's any indication of what terminates it. But I think the actual loading phase is more interesting. There is a possibility, given this is 9-month-old malware, that this has actually, the C2 for this has already died. Seems like it's also writing some stuff to program data shared library, so we can take a look at what that is. And that looks to be base 64. Okay, I can't make sense of the... We can try that in a hex editor. But first, let's just go decode, base 64 decode. Let's see what we got out of you. Gibberish. That's what I was expecting, but, you know, it never hurts to have a bit of optimism. I'm not seeing anything to indicate this is going to be shellcode, but we could try that. Probably, my best guess is this is just some junk. The fact that it's instantly terminating, you could try statically analyzing it. And the clang file, I believe, just deletes the INF. And that's to cover up what's happened. Yeah, I'm not seeing any pattern to indicate that this was shellcode. It does, like if we go here, you know, it's like on the verge of plausible. Like these aren't, like the biggest red flag is if you see a bunch of add instructions, that's a quick way of telling that that's not real assembly. Let's go back to the actual extension. You can find your VS Code extensions in here. And we can look at either of these because they're both malware. They're both the same malware. So we can go to package.json, and we can immediately see some questionable behavior here. So first of all, we can look at extension.js. This looks mostly reasonable. But then we go into env, and then we go here, and then we reach the problem. Now this looks like a Node.js module, but there's a secret. Wait a second. Is that base 64? Now you're starting to see this doesn't quite look right to me. We must have hit that with the wrong. Let me check that again. Actually, I think I know. I think it's reverse base 64. Let's just check the code again. So yeah, so we reverse that, and then we convert it to a string. So we can use CyberChef for that. And now we get something that looks very sensible. Now, the one case that isn't terribly advanced within this structure, and we'll just throw this in I love how we're using their theme to analyze their malware unob.js. So here we create, I'm just going to actually use a JS beautifier just to make this a bit more readable. Now we have some nice looking malware. So we use adm-zip to extract a hidden dependency. You see this banner.png inside path is absolute. That is not what you think it is. Then we put this in, advanced INF, custom destination. All of this is run, which allows a process to be started as system, and the service, oh, okay, I missed that. So the service actually seems to run, that run as network? No, I'm just misreading it. No, the service is up here, and then that allows it down there. So that gets written. And then ultimately, the JavaScript payload terminates. Then the malicious service is running and is ready to wreak havoc. So let's just take a look at the exe and see if we can discover anything about it. Shared.exe is our main problem. And we can see, again, this is an old file. And that could be a problem in terms of whether the C2 still works. So we get our, this looks like just normal initialization. We can check our strings, see if we find anything weird in here. And we're still waiting for the analysis, but that looks incredibly suspicious to me. Onion service. Install service A, query service status A. I can see why we're going to need that. I can verify that it is running as a service. Well, given it seems like they're just relying on the fact that Rust doesn't decompile well. Just seeing if we can find a C2. Still some onion stuff. But we don't see what came before it unless it's an onion checksum. Possible this is just a dependency that got compiled in. Might also be worth throwing this one in because it would seem there's some hidden functionality in here. Seeing a lot of LZMA, which is a compression system we don't quite understand. One of my favorite DIE tools is the, but if it would appear that there's nothing hidden in here. So this is actually Rust malware, not a Rust packer, which means we're not going to be getting much out of it. Maybe project I should start on is actually working to improve Binary Ninja, or like make a plugin for that, but not something we can do today, sadly. I do like what they've done with the strings. I think this must be a new addition. So we can now sort by length, which is one of the ways that I would try and find real strings rather than garbage. So one of the reasons why Rust is not a fun language to reverse engineer is because, unless someone goes out of their way to use the Windows APIs, Rust is going to use the standard libraries, much more idiomatic ones when you're doing, for example, file I/O, right? So if you were writing a program in C on Windows or C++, you would probably call kernel32 write file. If you're using Rust, there's a very good chance that what you would call is stdfs, and then that would, through a bunch of functions, provide a safe interface. A lot of benefits to that in terms of safety and portability, because then if you use the right type, you could do file I/O on both Windows and Linux with the same code, but it means we can't rely on just tracing everything from kernel32. So that's one of the things that makes reversing Rust more annoying. But we can see some really strange stuff in here, which makes it... I'm inclined to believe there's... So, let's see. Here's our... Now, one thing we can try, and I will, is now that we have the full file, which is twice as big as the malicious PNG, we can try throwing that on any run. So that didn't work, but it does terminate earlier, because when we ran it on this VM, we got 2 mystery base64 files, and when we ran it on the other VM, the sandbox, we got 1. So whether that's due to running it as a service, I'm not sure, but there is a slight difference. So that's all the time we have for today. So what are the main takeaways? Well, the inevitable one is, if you're an individual, be careful what you download, especially in terms of extensions, themes. If they have few downloads, if it's not a reputable author, the main way these types of scams will work is the Amber theme will come up at the top. But if you scroll down a bit, and of course for me, because I already have it installed, you don't see it. But if you try, say, the Afterglow theme, you can see the goal is to get you to click down here. So avoiding that, ideally, a lot of these publishers that are credible will actually be verified, and that'll tell you that it's safe. Like, for example, if you wanted to install the Rust extensions, right? That's verified, so it's safe. See? Verified malware. Safe. You wanted C++, that one actually comes straight from Microsoft. We got this nice blue check malware. So that's one way of checking. If you're an organization, having a system that prevents employees from downloading random extensions is a key piece of security, because it's the same as downloading random software. There is no security difference. They can do a lot of things, and like a Discord injector, they can inject your IDE so that every time it starts, it can run malicious code. if you've fallen for this. Well, the main indicators of compromise are in program data. You will have a CWL shaders folder containing these two malicious files. First thing I would do is I would uninstall, delete. I'll show you where we go. So we'll go %user profile %. That'll get to your user profile. In my case, C users lane. And then we're going to go and we will uninstall VS Code, and then we will delete this folder that contains your extensions. That's step one. Then make sure we don't have that service going, delete the files from program data. And unfortunately, from what I have seen, this is a mostly manual process right now because it doesn't seem many antiviruses detect these things. We can check that out and just see if I'm wrong. We can see a few hits, but not very many. And here, Kaspersky, okay, so we may have found some more information. Cobalt Strike, Lucas Steeler, NJ Rat. I don't know if these are, let's see what that triage links. Nope, it got a low score. Now this thing is really, really tricky. I'd almost want to play around with quilling to try and get it to work, but we don't really have time for that. So that is going to be all for this video. Please do let me know in the comments below what you thought about this, what you think about this class of cyber threat. Bye.